also, you have to turn that thing on, get it going, because we're going to listen to an example.
You got it.
I don't know what I would do without you, right? It is Valentine's Day, right?
You forgot a word.
What?
You forgot a word. A-Y.
Oh, gosh. Now, is that better?
Yes.
Does that make more sense?
Yes.
What does it mean? Somebody read that text. That's announcing the beginning of the class. Did you find it? Translate, that text. It says translation. Well, while you're doing that, have we got that hooked up, ready to go?
It's going to need probably another 10 seconds. It's just booting up. Maybe 20. Did you perform a software update on this? Nope, we're good.
Nobody can find that? You found it? The translation? I think it's is it the first one?
Oh, I found it.
Oh yeah, define Misa.
No, not the mass.
I found the
The
translation.
chanson.
If my face seems pale, the cause is love. Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Not yet.
I don't have a chanson here.
No, it won't say it. It's either the first entry or the second entry. Look at the first one.
Oh, I have a Landini and two devices.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it is the Misa.
Try the first one. No, it's not the mass.
So that's last.
Cantica Sinfonia.
Second one.
Yeah, that is the one.
Yes, that's it. Okay. Are we ready to go?
Yes.
All right.
It's playing.
I am. Okay, stop for just a second. All right. What do you think about that? Does that sound like music?
Yeah.
Is that a step up from the Landini Ballata? Or do you hear similarities? Well, were you here when I played the Landini? You know, we're progressing through music history, and we started with the great four-part organum, right, Wiederum. And that was from approximately 1240, and it's one of the colossal achievements of the 13th century. An amazing composition. Do you remember anything about that? How it was organized? The syllabic portions of the chant were set in sustained note style, and the melismatic portion of the chants all of a sudden turned to measured rhythms. And it is the sections in measured rhythms, which are called clausula or clausulae, that eventually become or turn into the conductus, and then the motet, and then the Trecento polyphony, the 14th century, secular polyphony, and then we come to the 15th century, and the greatest composer of the 15th century continental composer Dufay, William Dufay. This is a chanson which is from about 1430, but the text is rather curious. It's an anonymous text, and apparently it's a little older. And it's one of those ballade texts that uses rhymes and puns on words. So it being Valentine's Day, someone, I think, needs to read that poem in a rather beautiful way. Anybody got it? Who wants to read the translation? And we're waiting.
Music seems a little mismatched
Mismatched?
to the text.
Okay, well,
Are you gonna read it?
No.
Well, someone has to
Ready,
read it.
please? Okay, wait,
If my face seems
Oh,
pale,
nice.
the cause is love.
wait a minute, do it again. If my face seems pale, the cause is love.
It is the principal reason, and to me love is so bitter that I could throw myself into the sea. Now she knows in truth, the fair one I serve, that I cannot have any happiness without her. When I have a heavy weight of regret to carry, this love is hard for me to bear. For to enjoy myself she will not allow, except that I her wishes obey, and since she has such power, I cannot live without her. She is the most regal being that one might ever see. To love her faithfully I cannot resist. I'm mad to admire and not serve her. By receiving love from no one but her, I'm trapped if I do not wish to suffer. I cannot live without her.
I'm sure you all have taken courses here in the poetry of the troubadours and the travers and the minnesingers, right? Well, and what is that poetry called? What does it sound vaguely familiar like? Although the troubadours are like 12th century, and the travers, 12th and 13th century.
Like, what's the name of the style? Or
Now, what does this poetry sound like? What kind of love poem is this? Is it like something you'd find in Browning or Keats?
is it the chanson?
Well, yes, but what kind of love poem is it? Let's read it one more time. The first stanza gives it away.
If my face seems pale, the cause is love. It is the principal reason, and to me, love is so bitter that I could throw myself into the sea. Now she knows in truth, the fair one I serve, that I cannot have any happiness without her.
Keep on going.
Oh, you just said the first stanza.
I know. Well, I think we need a little more.
When I have a heavy weight of regret to carry, this love is hard for me to bear. For to enjoy myself she will not allow, except that I her wishes obey.
Now, what was that?
For to enjoy myself she will not allow, except that I her wishes obey. And since she has such power, I cannot live without her.
What kind of poetry is that? It's the age of,
Oh, courtly love.
yes, of chivalry and courtly love. Some people might even call it unrequited love. Yes? It's typical of knightly love or courtly love. It's an old text, right? I thought it was perfect for Valentine's Day. Let's listen to the chanson one more time.
From the beginning?
Yes.
Oh, this is no sounds coming up.
Stop. Anybody with imperfect pitch know where we are? What's the tonality? Yeah, it sounds like do to me, right? Okay, I could be wrong. All right, let's go. While the instruments are playing and the organ is trying to improvise. Do you hear any 6/3 chords in this or sonatives? Well, the next time they start singing, I want you to listen for that. Do you hear any kind of suspension figures in it?
Just hold on.
Now listen. Okay, let's put that aside. We'll come back to it. Do you hear any 6/3 sounds in that? You don't.
I
One or
heard
two.
they
You have-
weren't in like they weren't in closed like the
Yeah.
voicing was kind of weird.
Really? Okay. How many voices is this? Well, it's hard to tell. You know, how many voices is it? The organ doodles around and makes a horrible blunder in the instrumental part, and at the end also. Not exactly rhythmic. He's improvising, and I think the improvisation took a wrong turn. But at any rate, how many voices is this?
7.
7?
3.
Yes, it's 3 voices. Well, it's a good thing you said that, the conductor. But yes, there's 3 voices, all right?
Said what?
All right.
I think I missed that.
How many Neruda books do we have here today?
Oh,
Great, okay. All right.
I was told Frank said archive and started on.
Let's look at a Neruda poem, which I've promised to do for quite some time. And this is going to be on page 47. Get so that you can see it. This is one of my all-time favorite poems. There's actually a great setting of this poem by Michael Jubstrom. You know who he was or is? Yeah. Really beautiful setting of this poem. I don't know how he found it, but it's buried in this last collection of Neruda's poems. It's an amazingly beautiful poem, and it's pertinent to the rest of the discussion today. All right, so Carlos is going to read it for us in Spanish, and then I will read it in some sort of English. Speak up.
A small time. Oh, in Spanish. I'm looking for words that I don't know. Sorry, Frank. Okay.
Un animal pequeño, cerdo, pájaro o perro, desvalidos. Hirsuto entre plumas o pelo, oí toda la noche afiebrado, gimiendo. Era una noche extensa y en Isla Negra, el mar, todos sus truenos, su ferretería, sus toneles de sal, sus vidrios rotos contra la roca inmóvil, sacudía. El silencio era abierto y agresivo, después de cada golpe o catarata. Mi sueño se cosía como hilando la noche interrumpida, y entonces el pequeño ser peludo, oso pequeño o niño enfermo, sufría asfixia o fiebre. Pequeña hoguera de dolor, gemido, contra la noche inmensa del océano, contra la torre negra del silencio, un animal herido, pequeñito, apenas susurrante bajo el vacío de la noche y solo.
A small animal, pig, bird, or dog, defenseless, bristled with feathers or fur, I heard it all night, fevered, howling. It was a vast night, and in Ilsa Negra, the sea, all of its thunder, its floating hardware, its tons of salt, its glass broken against the immobile rock, the sea shuddered. The silence was clear and fierce after every bolt or shower. My sleep was stitched by the spinning of the interrupted night, and then the small, shaggy being, small bear or sick child, suffered asphyxia or fever, little bonfire of sadness, a cry against the immense night of the ocean, against the black tower of silence, wounded animal, so small, barely whispering beneath the emptiness of night, alone. All right, what do you think about that poem? Now, you know anything about Neruda's upbringing, his childhood, what his father did? Well, it might have some bearing on the poem, but Neruda's poetry to me is like opening up his mind and looking inside of it. And what you see is everything in it: emotion, fear, love, description, love of nature, love of women, love of life, everything. And it's so, when it comes out on the page, it's just like his mind or his thought is spilling out in front of you, and you see directly into it. His poetry is difficult to unwind, and you have to kind of take it all together. And it's extremely expressive and pictorial. It paints pictures. What do you think this poem is about? Shall I read it again? Yes, Dr. Alston. Okay, I will. A small animal, pig, bird, or dog, defenseless, bristled with feathers or fur, I heard it all night, fevered, howling. It was a vast night, and in Ilsa Negra, the sea, all of its thunder, its floating hardware, its tons of salt, its glass broken against the immobile rock, the sea shuddered. Silence was clear and fierce after every bolt or shower. My sleep was stitched by the spinning of the interrupted night, and then the small, shaggy being, small bear or sick child, suffered asphyxia or fever, little bonfire of sadness, cry against the immense night of the ocean, against the black tower of silence, wounded animal, so small, barely whispering beneath the emptiness of night, alone. Where does the word alone come from? is it really it's almost like a contraction of two words.
Is like not, and then I don't know what lone is.
One. It means all one.
Oh.
So if it's all one, what does that mean?
You are everything.
What does it refer to? Okay, I'm sure there's plenty of gasoline in the engine, you know. Let's start it. Okay? What does it mean? What does it refer to?
Exactly what you think. All one. You are.
But what does that mean? If you're all one, what does that mean?
All that are present is one, which and that one
What
is
is
you.
present? The world, everybody in it, the insects, the trees, obviously
Well, it
the
depends
rocks on Ilsa Negra. Why is it called that? What is Ilsa Negra? What is that?
on Isla Negra.
Where is it?
Island.
No, it's not an island.
It's a place in Chile.
Yeah, it's a place in Chile, and it's about 60 miles west, as far as I know, of Santiago. What does Santiago mean?
St. James.
St. James, yes. About 60 miles west of that. And why is it called Ilsa Negra?
Something about it was black.
Black. What's black about it?
Beaches.
If you go on the internet, I didn't have to do this because I have friends in North Carolina that just made a trip to South America. And they spent a lot of time in Chile. And they went to Neruda's 3 houses, and this is one of them. And they took a picture of the coast there on the Pacific Ocean. And it's an unusual thing. There are these gigantic rocks that look like they've been in a tumbler, you know, polished or finely washed. And they're black looking. And they're just piled up along the shore. It's very mysterious. Neruda loved the ocean. His description of the Pacific Ocean was that it didn't know where to go. This vast stretch of ocean had no idea where to go. And so it wandered around and finally decided to plop itself in his front yard. He loved the ocean and he loved everything in it. And I think his description in this poem is just so expressive of what he thought of the ocean, what it was like, its life. He always animates it, and the things that were in the ocean. It's a very interesting description. But that doesn't tell you what all one means. What does that mean? What is he trying to point out? So it's the last word in the poem, and there's a comma, and then just alone.
Does it have to do with the small animal and its surroundings?
It's a reference. Well, it tries to connect the animal, but who is alone?
I think he's like using that picture as it's like reflecting. It's like seeing, almost like reflecting himself through observation of another. In a way, like that's kind of how it feels.
Well, that's the connection. But what is the all one? It doesn't mean, you know, I'm one with the universe. It doesn't mean that. It could, but I don't interpret it that way, and I
Maybe
certainly don't think Neruda interprets it that way.
just that, like there's commonality, like there's shared experience. But
Well,
I don't know. I mean, didn't he write it in Spanish though?
Yeah,
It's like a good translation, we hope.
it's a very good translation.
Yeah, but the
And since
etymology
we don't read Spanish, we depend on the English. And I believe very strongly in translations.
Yeah, solo means alone.
Yes, means alone.
Latin solus. ultimately from Proto-Indo-European, related to se, oneself. See, English
It,
What?
just, it connects
So-
all of humanity. Like in
No.
but we're all sharing experiences now.
What did you say? Oh, great one.
Oneself.
Self.
Yes, self. Etymology, ultimately from Proto-Indo-European, something reflexive pronoun related to se, oneself. See, English-
Oneself. Okay. Well, now that's closer.
I think it has to do with one's uniqueness among your surroundings.
Okay. That's
Even the
that's
connection.
closer.
Maybe it's talking about every subject in the poem. You know, you're alone, the sea's alone, the wounded animal's alone.
All one.
Yes.
Oh.
Each,
Wait, did
all
all-
one.
Sorry.
It's all one. What is all one?
Like
Uh.
unified.
Entirely.
Yes.
Autonomous like doesn't need anything else.
If you use all in an expression in mathematics or in logic, what does it mean?
Nothing
Sun.
else.
Totality.
Totality. Yes. It does mean that. It's a very, specific term. So he's referring to this, all this scene in his mind and all that, and then all of a sudden he says all one or alone. And it tells us something about the human condition or the human nature. And what is that? You said it, we're all dancing around the core of this. What does it really mean?
The opposite of schizophrenia.
Autism?
Well,
One
it could
single
mean
self
all of that.
that's unified within itself.
I heard a talk the other day, and if you believe in that, everyone is schizophrenic. Never mind, that's a cryptic remark, and I take it back. What does the all one refer to? She said unique. I refer to what? I call it what?
Individual.
Yes, individual. What is actually the etymology of individual? Have any idea?
Not able to be divided.
So,
Undivided. It's an interesting idea, isn't it? So put that all together. All one, undivided, alone.
solo.
But like that's so confusing because like if the poem is about him seeing a reflection of himself in this creature,
That's part
like,
of it.
It baffles me that he's like defying the meaning of that word and like using these two like separate like identities or whatever.
The poem is referring to something,
Yeah.
some incident or some sensory impression.
Did he have
Right.
a brother who fell ill or something like that?
No, that's
Crying
not what
in the
this
night.
means.
I mean, it's
They could actually refer to the fact that he was essentially exiled, right? And the story about the ending of his life. It's rather mysterious. I don't think there's much conjecture about it, but
He died the year of the dictatorship.
right. Who was his good friend that was deposed or taken out of office? Allende?
Allende.
Yes.
Neruda was hospitalized with cancer at the time of the coup d'etat led by Augusto Pinochet, but returned home after a few days when he suspected a doctor of injecting him with an unknown substance for the purpose of murdering him at the orders of Pinochet. Neruda died in his house in Isla Negra on September 23rd, 1973, hours after leaving the hospital.
Yes. So many people feel that his cancer treatment was stopped and the doctor injected him with some lethal dose of something, and he died shortly after that. The other story is that they stopped that they were ordered to stop the treatment of the cancer, and he just died. That's another story. At any rate, I think Neruda, was a people person. He was a communist, And that means something different at the particular time, I think. He was marginalized, and he lived his life mostly running away and in exile. So this represents, to me, a kind of, not disappointment, but an understanding of exactly what is the nature of one's place in the world. And what is that place? This is,
Alone.
yes, it's the reason why his poetry is so penetrating and so authentic and so great. You see, he understands the nature of the human mind, essentially. And that is that you create your worldview. And the things that happen around you are interpreted by your own mind. And then the realization is that, oh, wait a minute, it's not really the world. The world is me. And the interesting thing about it, and this is expressed very clearly in this poem, if the world is me, then it means that I am that world. Nothing outside. It's everything that's inside. So I am the individual. My worldview altogether is undivided. Although, in essence, it may contain many divisions, but all those divisions are internal to me. All the conflicts, all the hopes, all the loves, all the tragedies, all the desires, all the non-desires, everything is inside of you. You are the world, and the world is you. That's not my little slogan, but it's apropos to this. So, is this a poem of despair? Is it a poem of insight? Is it a poem of, is it a eureka moment in his life? What is it?
Yes.
That's a rock group from the 70s. Actually, a very good one. You don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about?
I've heard it.
Yeah, it's amazing. They're like real musicians, if you consider that music, all that kind of stuff, music, which I do, more so than others that are labeled music. But that's an editorial remark. Okay, a small animal, pig, bird, or dog, defenseless, gristled with feathers or fur. I heard it all night, fevered and howling. It was a vast night. That's why we call this, noches extensa, right? Vast night. And in Ilha Negra, the sea, all of its thunder, its floating hardware. What on earth does that mean? What is the Spanish word for that?
For what?
Hardware, it says. It's
Ferretería.
Mm-hmm. What's the root of that word?
Iron.
Ferrous. Ferrous is what?
Iron.
Iron. What is an ironmonger? It's what that word means.
Ferret.
The word actually means what?
Ferris.
Hardware. Or hardware store. Hardware. What do you buy in a hardware store? You buy iron. You buy iron nails, gates,
fix
hinges,
things.
whatever.
By the ore.
Tools.
But by extension, not extensive, but by, if we extend that, it's things that you buy like hardware. Could mean anything, like Home Depot, right? Why would he say such a thing like that? What's the image he's trying to create here? All of its thunder, it's floating hardware. What's the floating hardware?
Like miscellaneous things that potentially could be used for something very specific.
Well,
but-
I think let's stop at miscellaneous things. What would the
So
miscellaneous
floating in the
things be?
Why would it be floating if it's made out of iron? Well,
Probably not.
Not made out of iron.
No, but
Okay,
that's
well,
funny.
but
The,
that's the word it
the
comes
word
from,
is
though.
the root of the
Yeah.
word comes from the Latin ferrous, right?
Is he trying to like not make sense?
No, it
Oh,
makes
sorry,
sense.
that's insulting. I didn't mean to.
Floating is
Yeah.
added. That's not
Yeah.
in the original version. It
Oh.
doesn't
Well, what does it say?
say su ferretería.
Okay.
What is that? Translate it.
It's hardware. It
Okay.
doesn't say floating.
So it may not.
Well, it is floating. It's something that's in the sea.
The contractor had to run away before the tide overtook him. And had
No,
to leave his
no,
things
no.
behind.
What would that be? It's a floating hardware. It's an image.
Just all the
Like
branches and
parts of
stuff
things.
floating.
That's
Yeah.
part of could be, or it could be what?
Like shipwreck?
That could be that. Or things that were thrown over, right?
Yeah. Like not being used.
Right. Well, Neruda, you wouldn't know this, but his love for the sea, he used to go down to the sea and just look at it and wander around and try to find the things that floated up on the shore. One day he found this door floating, and he was determined to pull it out of the sea. Well, he did, and he cleaned it off and stuck it in his office at Ilza Negra. That's what this is referring to, the hardware in the sea.
Where was the door from? Like
Yeah.
the ship or?
Yeah, whatever, I don't know.
Was it
Fallen
there?
into the water somehow. So it's things that are floating along, just drifting along, right? Why would he put something like that in it?
Like-
The word hardware. It's tons of salt. It's glass broken. Now that's another image. It doesn't really mean glass, does it?
Like abandoned things that are no longer useful.
Well, wait a minute. Broken glass. What is broken glass?
Well, it's glass that you've broken.
Tons of salt and broken glass.
I think.
Oh,
that-
like sand.
What?
Sand.
Sand.
Oh, I thought it was supposed to be a metaphor for like the smooth surface of the sea, like that. Like, but it's because the next phrase is broken against the immobile rock. like,
Exactly.
It's like waves crashing. against
Exactly.
the- Yeah, that's cool to the sand though.
It's all related to the sea, right? The broken glass could be the sand that's turned up in the sea. It could be the sea that's completely calm, then the waves come thundering in and crashes against those black rocks, thundering against the rocks. And then the sea shuddered. Why does the sea shudder? What does that mean?
Because it's cold.
What happens after a crashing wave? It ripples, right? Or kind of resent or retracts, whatever. The silence was clear and, well, how can it be silence? All right. The silence was clear and fierce after every bolt or shower of glass, apparently, right?
And tons of salt.
And the salt.
Well,
Salt
it's-
spray.
It's not like utter silence, but it feels like silence because like these impacts are. So
Well, he
there's
says the
silence
silence was clear
between
and
them.
fierce after each bolt or shower.
Mhm.
My sleep was stitched by the spinning of the interrupted night. What does that mean?
He kept getting woken up.
Spinning.
No, the constant revolution from crash to silence lulled him to sleep. He created, it sewed it together like a sewing machine.
Of the interrupted night. What is interrupting the night? Is it the sea that's interrupting the night? The regularity of the sea?
Little
I think so.
creature.
The
What?
creature.
The little creature.
The dog, the creature, whatever it is, right? And that's when he begins to talk about and muse on the nature of his own life. Then the small shaggy being, small bear, or a sick child, right? It was different from a pig or a dog, right? Suffered asphyxia or fever. What is asphyxia? Couldn't breathe, right? Or a high fever. Little bonfire of sadness. A cry against the immense night of the ocean. Little bonfire? That's a contradiction, isn't it? Aren't bonfires enormous, like bunch of things burning out of control.
Mm.
Well, maybe not out of control, but
There's still some of
intense
the
flame.
forest fires.
So I wouldn't think a lighted match is a bonfire. I guess you could say it is in an atomic perspective.
Is it supposed to be like an oxymoron?
Yes, I think it is. Bonfire of sadness, a cry against the immense night of the ocean. It's the ocean at nighttime, I guess. What about the ocean at nighttime? The moon is not shining. The moon is shining, the ocean does look like glass. Have you ever seen the ocean at night, midnight, under a clear sky? You have black against black, right? With the stars, which are like Argus, right? The 100-eyed monster that kept track of Io. Who was Io?
From Aeschylus.
It's a
Girl
Phoenician
who was
goddess.
Stung by a
It's the
cat.
goddess of the moon, right?
Oh.
You remember that from Prometheus?
That Zeus turned into a cow.
Uh-huh.
Oh, poor thing. Yeah.
Don't you remember that?
Yeah.
Turned into a cow.
Well,
All right.
Asia.
Never mind, that's just an aside here. Okay, against the immense night of the ocean, against the black tower of silence. Wounded animal, so small, barely whispering beneath the emptiness of night. So we've got a tower of silence, the immense night, the emptiness of night.
Earlier the creature was howling, and now it's whispering.
Well, I think the animal howling, I don't think it's changed its volume level. I think what's changed is his comparing it to the immensity of the universe or the world or whatever, nature. And it insists that, I think, in a certain way, you have no idea what's going on. That it is inside of your head. And so, what is man? What is my place?
All over.
What is it? Where am I? Do you think this is a despairing poem?
Yeah.
It feels
Resignation.
rather apathetic to me.
Apathetic? In a certain sense, I might agree with that. I think it's not happy and it's not sad, really. I don't think it's a statement. Yeah.
If the poem itself isn't despairing, I think it depicts a despairing situation. Despaired, rather.
I think it's too like descriptive in a way to like impose, right? Like I wouldn't would call it despairing because it's just descriptive, you know. Like
Well,
I think it's
what
trying
is he saying about the world at that moment? Is he fantasizing about it, or is he depicting it as what? There's a lot of expressive things in here. The immense night, the emptiness of the night, the spinning of his interrupted sleep. I mean, those are all images. But the truth of it is that he's looking at the world and at nature, and what is he looking at? What is the sum total of what he is talking about? Isn't he referring to the what does he see in the world? Or in the night, which is representative of the world?
Well, it's kind of unfeeling and silent and kind of cold and like unresponsive.
So those are characteristics that we usually associate with the nature of out there, the universe, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And so what is that?
Reality.
Who said that? You? Not reality, but
Actual.
actual, right? It's something that is actual. And in that moment, he sees the world as it actually is, or as close to what we have. And then he has an insight into the nature of his own mind, which is that he interprets the world internally, that all belongs to him. And he is alone, or all one, in his relationship to the world. It's a remarkable poem. Virtually every one of his poems has some deep insight into that, in addition to the doors opening and closing, which is the window of the mind into the world. We've read a number of poems that talk about that, entrances and exits. Okay, well, that is fantastic. All right, now, let's see. Let's go back to Dufay. And this is a little test. Take one and pass it around. Do not look at it. You know, I'm trying to be
Equitable.
well, no, I'm trying to be, I don't want to be under scrutiny about my educational means or techniques. So I'm starting to give tests. Actually, every time you come in here, I think of it as a test.
Character?
Yeah. Actually, I do. I said don't look at it. All right? Now, let's go back to the Dufay, and let's listen to it one more time. Just the first stanza. Stop. Now, what's that thing at the end that they're not singing? They could have sung that, but it would be just on the last syllable or whatever. But they choose, appropriately, I think, to have it played by the instruments.
Is it a conductus?
And what's the characteristic of the conductus?
Like,
What do you call that?
well, like it's transition?
Very, no, not a
Oh,
transition.
sorry.
There was great hope for a minute.
Somebody help me out.
Connects. Connection.
You know what the characteristic of a conductus is? Sometimes it starts with, now remember, the conductus originates in a period where the setting of a syllabic text was extremely difficult. And the way it was usually accomplished is you just wrote the text and notated the rhythm in a rhythmic mode, and you did your best to kind of fit the words in. However, this conductus, which was extracted out of the technique of the discant clausula, where every part is measured, and generally the lower voice of a three-part texture was in the longer notes, and the two upper voices, the duplum and the triplum, were the faster-moving voices in a rhythmic mode, right? Well, they thought of a very ingenious way of trying to establish the rhythm and how the word should go, syllabic words should go under the notated rhythms, which you couldn't tell. Why couldn't you tell? You could not write a single note with a single syllable because the notational system wouldn't permit it. How would you discern the rhythm in this music? by the way in which the ligatures or notes were grouped together. If you had group 2, 3, 3, it meant that you had to perform it in one of the particular rhythmic modes. Da, 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 or da, 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 right? Or da, 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 whatever that signal. So you wouldn't be able to tell where the syllables went according to the ligatures. Nowadays, we write one note per syllable. And then for a melisma, you put a slur over the notes. Yes? And hopefully the slurs and the melismas match the accentuation of the text. Well, that was non-existent at this time. So usually the conductus was preceded by a little tag at the beginning and another tag at the end. Right? What would be the first word that would pop into your mind if you heard this and you heard them singing and then all of a sudden you heard this little instrumental tag at the end? You would call it a what?
Interlude?
No, you would call it a
Ritornello.
what? What?
Ritornello?
No, that ritornello means return, whatever.
Coda?
That does return. What?
Coda?
Coda. Yes. And what's the proper term in the conductus? Nobody knows this. Do you remember that? Cauda.
Oh, the
We're talking
head.
about the ocean today.
Yeah.
Cauda. Or caude.
Does that
Is
mean
what?
head?
No.
No, I was thinking cowdex.
Tail.
Tail.
Okay.
So, it's kind of odd to have a tail at the beginning. But the little fragments at the beginning of a conductus, if there were any, were short. But it was an effort to tell you what the rhythmic mode is going to be and to help you to figure out how to put the text. And then at the end, there was another extended passage. Right?
Sorry, is the conductus just that little instrumental part?
No, the conductus is a vocal piece.
So the whole piece is
The-
called a conductus.
Yes, the whole thing. The form of a conductus is a little tag at the beginning, the text, right? And then an instrumental tag at the end.
Would there have been an instrumental thing at the very beginning?
Yes, sometimes there is.
Sometimes. Okay.
Most frequently, it's at the end.
Yeah.
This is a direct reference to that, although there's no more modal notation as such. Remember, we're in the 15th century. The conductus is a 13th century invention or development. The polyphonic conductus, what is a conductus anyway?
You said it's a piece.
It has religious underpinnings or origins, right? What does the word conductus mean? It means to lead in, right? So it was some preliminary text or whatever that began a procession. It was non-liturgical, but it was religious. Okay, all right. Well, let's listen to it one more time. No looking. And we're going to split this apart. So far, it sounds really great.
Just another 2 seconds.
It's the... Stop. All right. Give me the bass note here. Let's try to do a reduction. Okay. The bass and the soprano. We've got this, right? That we have, yes? Okay, and we also have that. Let's erase the text here.
We're not going to try to dictate the text alongside the notes.
All right, let's listen to it one more time. Stop. Now, what happens here? That,
Oh, it sustains. No.
listen to it one more time. What is there? What else is on here? Wait, stop. Is there any other note in here?
A G, a soul.
Yes. So it's the ubiquitous 8/5, right? Okay. Which is the usual beginning. Okay. Then it goes to what?
5/3.
Yeah, soul.
Is it down here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Listen again. Stop. Then, ooh.
Is that
Wow.
a parallel?
Well, I would think it's probably this, right?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Clever.
Otherwise, that would be parallel fifths. Now, that's interesting, right? It is a way to now conspicuously avoid fifth relations between voices. Never mind between the composite sound, because it still sounds like parallel fifths, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, just momentarily. And so, what else? There's another tone in there. Is that a complete or incomplete chord?
There's a dough in there somewhere.
Listen one more time. All right, okay. All right, where's the other note?
It's in the tenor. It's like a third of the bass.
There, right?
Tenor.
Well, it's not the tenor, but like
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, well, we're just doing
It's just
this
in the-
as it is. No voice crossing or anything. All right? How long does that sound last? Let's listen to it one more time. Oh, you gotta go. No. Stop. This goes on up to what?
Voice exchange.
Are you convinced that there's a soul in the first note?
I am, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't hear it that much.
I may be wrong, but I think I'm right. Does everybody hear a G in there?
I don't
Okay.
hear it.
You don't? Okay. Well, that sound system is,
I don't think it's the sound system.
you don't?
They're
Okay,
only one
all
protected
right.
from the bass anyway. Even if there wasn't one. So.
Okay.
Maybe
Now,
I just
what
need
happens
volume.
here?
Voice exchange.
At least that's what I hear. Now you've got me doubting my ear.
And does the
I
law
don't really hear anything anyway. Okay, what?
does the law hold in the bass for like another note? No.
I don't think so. So look at this bass line. Wow, if you did that in somebody's class, you'd probably get a 0. Okay. All right, let's go. One more time. One more time. Let's hear the beginning.
Stop there, probably.
Let's see.
Keep going.
No, play it again. Okay, now stop. What happens here?
Syncopation after the voice exchange.
No, listen to what's the next sonority?
From the bottom, Re, Fa, Si.
One more time. If you hear it, why don't you tell us? Anybody here, before we play it again? Wait. Anybody know what happens after this?
We find an F sharp somewhere.
Soprano go down to C.
Is there another note in here?
Sol. C.
Yeah? Okay. So, and I think the G is in here, right?
Why did you erase the G from the beginning?
Because it might not be in there. I'm just following the lead of one person who says
It's there.
you don't hear the G in there. Okay? We'll find out in a minute. Okay? It might not be.
Are they so in tune that it's like?
Well,
it really sounds
that's
like
a- Well, that is the thing that establishes that as a tonic, right? Actually, the fundamental doesn't need to be present, but if the third, the fourth, and the fifth harmonic are present, the ear determines that as that frequency, right? That is actually the basis, in my opinion, of consonance. And it's not a feature, it's not a kind of a cultural feature of Western music. It's a feature of the human auditory system. So if it's a feature of the human auditory system, it's bound to be discernible in music all over the world. Well, guess what? It is. Okay, let's go on. Right. What happens here? No, don't listen to single voices. Tell me what happens here vertically.
Okay, so mi, la, si.
This, give me
That's
the
right.
figured bass. This is a 6-3,
Going to a 5/3.
5-3.
Yeah, but then the two lower voices move down. It's another 6/3, correct? So re, fa, si.
Just to a 6-3, yes?
And then the top voice moves down. So it's like a weird suspension.
Like that,
Yeah.
yes? Okay, so let's listen to it one more time. Do I have everything correct up here? This is
There's
not
a
quite
super
right.
weird jumpy bass line that goes to D first.
Dang it. Okay, wait, so the next.
It's fa sharp, yes?
Instead
Okay.
of fa natural.
No, not that. It's fa natural for a moment. It then si la si, and then at the second time it goes to C. Then you have a fa sharp.
I'm not sure how many times it repeats.
It goes back here.
Yeah, so it's fa natural where you put the sharp sign tentatively, and then it becomes a fa sharp afterwards.
Play it again. Right?
Sol to fa.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so this is natural, right? This goes back to 5-3 and then to 6-3, right? And then
And then to 5.
to this.
Well, there's also the re, fa, la still.
Oh, yeah.
The soprano moves down to la. 6 to 5.
Before the A5 at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an older cadential form. That's like the under third cadence, right? Landini style cadence. Yeah, that is correct. Okay? Now let's listen to the whole phrase one more time. Yeah, and then that is a cadence, and then this. So,
I looked up the cadence.
3, right? This is a diminution, 3, 2, 1, right? And then this is actually projected over into this. Where's the re here?
In the bottom.
Mi, re, do becomes mi through the voice exchange, mi, re, do. Yes? So you see the advancement in the polyphony already. These kind of repetitions are beginning to occur. This is why I think you have an unmistakable impression of the C as the axis, as the fundamental. And the harmonicity is provided by the consonant frame inside of this chord. You hear these clearly defined as dissonances, right? There's no like harmonic progression in this, but there is tonality. So the tonality in our reason for perceiving this in C is because of these things, right? Now, this particular structure, the chanson, and why it's so important, is that Dufay's invention was to add a second tenor voice, which he called the contratenor bassus. that is, a tenor voice as a bass against the tenor, right? And so it allows that voice to move freely composed below the fixed tone of the tenor. Are you following what I'm saying? And those two voices, that's the reason for this. The two voices exchange, they're basically in the same register, but they change places. So it's very much like doing a first species 3-part exercise where the cantus firmus is in the middle and you're adding a newly composed voice at the bottom. It immediately frees up the relationship of the counterpoint, and it actually reinterprets the cantus firmus in a different way. It's a remarkable and a significant change or development in the history of music. And it sets, all these things that we're doing set the path for the development of Western contrapuntal polyphony. Most world music is polyphonic, but only Western music, for some reason, probably because of its underpinnings in the classical world, were obsessed with working out these relationships. If these things were not innately configured somehow in the mind, you would never have this. That's one of my premises, that Western music exploits these capacities in the mind to a very high degree. They're by no means all of them, and it's exactly the same thing you find in languages around the world. Some languages use some things, other languages use more, maybe less things, but they all have at their core the same fundamental operational processes. It's just that Western music took this to a much higher level. This is not made up. In a certain sense, if you want to call it cultural, yes, because they were all sitting around in courts and in monasteries and whatever and did this. So what? That doesn't have anything to do with how this happened or what is being produced. This is a product of the human mind. And this would not be possible if there were not at some level elements in the mind that facilitated this kind of stuff, or growth. This is not evolution. It's change over time. And it took a long time for these things to emerge. But the significance of Dufay is that he got this. Now, look at this. 5-3, 6-3. 5-3, 6-3, 5-3, then the next octave, yes? All right, so we're beginning to see the fact that thirds stacked together create some kind of consonance. Where do you think he got this idea? This is totally uncharacteristic of the Landini Ballata that we listened to from the Trecento, although it was greatly advanced from the kind of plodding but beautiful Wiederund 4-part organon. Have any idea where these 6-3 sounds come from, like in motion like this? Maybe this is not a great example. Let's continue along.
It's muted, sorry.
Now, wait a minute. You hear the end of that phrase? It ended on a what?
A third.
A third, right? Okay. Right there. What do you hear?
B flat and C flat.
Doesn't that phrase start like that? Play it again. Back it up just a little bit. Stop. Dun, dun, bum, bum. Do, si, la, sol. How's that done?
Sorry, where was the phrase that started on a 6-3?
Right there.
I thought it started.
I didn't hear that.
No, starts right there.
But
And
where,
it's preceded
where is
by
that?
a do.
When does that happen?
Yeah.
Right there.
Is that the one that starts on the like?
Do. You hear this. Dee, ah,
Oh, they sort of they elided it. It doesn't sound. There's no full stop before it. There.
Yeah, okay. All right. Isn't this a succession of 6-3 sounds?
Are we just
Right.
talking about the cadence? Not what the. Yeah, that's not
No,
the
it's a
cadence.
series of sounds. Are you listening? Do it again. Again? Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah.
You don't hear that? Do you hear it?
Oh,
Okay, all right. So, mi, sol, do, re, fa, si,
I'll try.
do,
Not yet.
mi,
So
fa, do,
C flat.
C flat,
Oh yeah.
E flat,
La do sharp.
So far.
and then, whoa,
La do sharp.
do sharp, holy cow.
Fa sharp there.
And then down to me.
And then, how do you write G? I like that.
And
Okay,
there's a ray in that.
all right.
Is there?
Yes, the harp plays it.
Yeah, well, it would be, I think. Yeah, okay. Well, it would be highly unlikely that that tone would be notated. That's definitely an F sharp, right? Okay, that's a ficta, and it produces this particular cadence, right? Look at this succession of chords, of sonorities, right?
B flat.
Notice that this, oh, I left out the B flat. Where is that? Right here?
Yeah, bass.
I'm sorry. Okay. All right. That would have to be there also. Okay. Now look at this succession of tones. Notice that that goes down a sixth, right? And this goes to the A, right? Okay. What's the relationship of this to that?
A fifth.
6 to 5.
Yes, it's a 6-5 process. But these chords prolong this interval, right? Down a fifth, yes? And it facilitates the motion down a sixth of the upper voice inside of this chord, right? Now, this is not characteristic of early 15th century continental music, but it is a characteristic of mid-century or from the 30s or the 40s. Why do you think Dufay got this idea? You know anything about Muzak history from the late 14th century in England?
Auburn.
The Fay Burden, right?
Sure.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
What is that?
6/3 chords.
It's a form of improvised polyphony, right? Where you have this as the consonant axis, but then you're adding a third below, yes? Which creates the impression of a 6/3 sonority, right? Why did presumably, the people on the British Isles discover this sound? Why are they running in parallel organum like this with thirds?
By accident.
I don't think it's by accident.
Sounded good, so they.
What is prevalent in the body of Sarum chant, which is British.
What
The
is-
chant melodies, if you look at them, what's the characteristic motion in that chant repertoire? You probably wouldn't know. Nobody ever discussed this in music history?
I mean, we didn't ever get as specific as like different types of like chant. I don't think.
Well, you don't have to get specific about Ambrosian or Gallican or whatever, but you certainly do have to get a little knowledge about Sarum chant. Characteristic of Sarum chant is that it moves frequently in thirds. It arpeggiates triads much more frequently than continental chant or Frankish chant or Roman chant. And so apparently it dawned on them, oh yeah, that's the fifth harmonic. That sounds really great. Oh, it's part of this, right? I mean, their minds are saying that. Okay, so whose music is filled with, not filled, but features those kind of successions?
This one?
No, English. Dunstable, Lionel Power and Jonathan Dunstable, or John Dunstable. Yeah. And where's the music for that? What's that codex called? No. No. I'm not telling you.
It's in my other notebook. I have it written down somewhere.
1 second. A Dunstable IMSLP.
A manuscript.
Collections. Cantantibus
The
Organis.
old. Yeah.
Old Hall?
Yes, it's the old Hall manuscript. Well, whatever. That doesn't make any difference. Okay. Do you think DeFay went to England? Or Dunstable went to the continent? Yeah. That's where this sound comes from, right? The parallel 6/3 motion, right? But it's interwoven into a very, a polyphonic texture. It's a liberating moment. This is why Dufay is so important. His music is so important. This is startlingly innovative, right? Now, let's continue to listen to this, and then we'll go on to Siddhartha. There we go. Stop one more time. What is recaptured after this? Right? It's not a coincidence that it has this kind of form or shape to it, tonally. The others would say, oh, you're projecting all this on the music. Well, you're not projecting it. You're using your ear. At least I'm using my ear, and I hope you are using your ear, right? It doesn't matter if you call it consonant or not, right? That's what it is. These are the sounds in it, and this is the explanation for it. You can call it, we don't know what it is. It's just the way they composed. You can call it that, but you hear it inside of a C major chord. It's got to be a property of that. It turns out that, yes, I think it's a consonant. Did you follow any of that? That wasn't a very strong argument, but because I'm too embroiled in passion, right? It is Valentine's Day. And I'm very passionate about this. I'm passionate about music, believe it or not. Right? Okay, all right, let's put that aside. No, play it to the end. Get the G. All right, stop. Okay, now right before the coda, you hear what in the bass? What's the next note? bum, bum. That's on page 9,000 of the harmony book, right? Play once again. You might hear it. You might not. I might be making it up. You hear it? Ta-da.
It's just
It's just bum, then after a while.
Bum, 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 bum.
I don't know that it ever does.
Oh, yes, it does.
Not at that spot right before the coda, and I'm not
Maybe in the harp.
No, it's before that. It's not in the coda. Hear it? Da. Surely you hear it. That, yeah.
So it's in the bass of bum, bum, bum. Sorry, too far.
Right.
Yeah, there.
Da, da, da.
So I went to Ray. Yeah.
Okay, I heard that enough. Ridiculous playing. Okay, all right. Thank you. All right. Well, so much for that. Let's go to. Well, now you can look at this. Just a second. Ah. Is the G at the beginning?
No.
Not in here.
Maybe in the organ.
Maybe in the organ. Maybe an overtone from those ancient string instruments.
Monica,
Or
do
maybe
you,
the harp.
do you hear the organ in that recording?
Yeah, there's an organ in there.
At that instrumental part in the end, there was the organ.
Yeah, no,
It's definitely there.
it's definitely not there.
No, the organ.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's saying that look,
I
the
hear
tenor
the
line.
instrumental part.
Okay.
Dun, bum, 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 bum. That's the tenor voice,
In the coda.
and he's
I hear it.
really loud, right? Okay. Well, now you look at the music. Just take one more glance at the bottom of the page. This is actually the instructions for the tenor and the Missa Salvatore Pali, right? The Mass is built on this chant. This is such a fascinating piece. The Mass is really incredible. We'll look at the Gloria from this Mass next week. But the Pale Face, this Mass was written for the court of Savoy. Now, the court of Savoy won an auction on Amazon, and they were able to get a hold of the Shroud of Turin. You know what the Shroud of Turin was?
The world's oldest article of clothing. No, sorry.
It's presumably it has an image of
No.
Christ's face.
Yeah,
It was the
It's-
cloth that
yeah,
covered
it's like
Christ's
actually
face.
still in like a church in Italy somewhere. It's like really
Yeah,
cool. People
it's
like
a
go visit.
relic.
Yeah.
All these competing places wanted relics so that they could, have a kind of a hotel business and a tourist attraction. Santiago de Compostela was, one of the main pilgrimage routes in the 13th and 14th century.
Oh my gosh, St. Clement's in Philadelphia has two like arm bones. For
Yeah.
I just found out.
Right,
You can go
okay.
see those.
Well, at any rate, the Shroud of Turin became known as the Shroud of Turin, but it was owned by the Savoys, and it was later moved to Turin. This Mass, when I see your pale face, the pale face refers to the faint image of Christ's face on that shroud.
Oh.
That's true. It's very true.
Is that supposed to be because of the light of when he died?
Like Veronica
Like,
wipes the face.
When he resurrected,
This is the shroud.
Oh, really?
he produced this light that projected the...
Well, unfortunately, the carbon dating of that piece of cloth comes from like
Yeah, it's fake.
1300 or whatever, long after the supposed event. Yes. Okay. Well, look at the bottom, and this is the tenor melody. Dun, 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 dun. Well, oh yes, Well, this is what clef. Read it in what clef?
Tenor.
Alto.
The alto clef. This is a remarkably different notation from the notation in the organum of Periton. This time you see the notes having specific values. If you look at the beginning, you'll see that little circle that's there. We went through that. The circle means what? Now remember, this normally specifies tempus and prolation.
It's the perfection that talks about what rhythm mode it's in.
Yeah, the circle signifies perfection at the lower level, not the lowest level. That would be the mood. But these symbols refer to the relationship of tempus and prolation. The tempus is the basic unit, and the prolation is the division of the unit. So the circle signifies perfection at the tempus, and the lack of a dot in the middle of it signifies that the prolation is imperfect.
So 3/4.
So, yes, so tempus perfectum, prollatio imperfectum. Yes? So it gives you 3/4. So the first unit is a long, the second diagonal, or I mean the whatever, yeah, okay, is the breve, and the notes with the stems on them are semibreves. Now, it preserves elements of ligature notation, and you see that in the combination of the semibreve and the long. You see how they attach together? That's a vestige of the older notation. And somewhere along the line, Leah, look at the end of the first line. You see that oblique neum, like extended oblique?
Oh.
That's only 2 notes. And what value would that be?
The same as the
Fon, right?
The 2 notes, right?
This is that like diagonal box.
Yes.
but what time value would they?
Yes. What time value is that?
Huh.
Just 8 notes.
Would it be the not the longest one, but the second longest?
Breve.
Yeah, so the breve.
Yeah, they're breves. Okay? All right, that's an odd notation. Notice there's a dot after the other breve. Well, those dots are actually phrasal marks. That's a common way of notating a phrasal mark. Or a rest, right? Okay, well, that's interesting. We're going to discuss more of that. And the tenor gives you ter dicitur primo quilibet figura crescit in triplo, secundo in duplo, tertio uniacet. What in the world is that? That's a canon. What is a canon?
Well, when a clown wants to do like a really big stunt trick, they
No.
say
Canon is a rule. This tells you the rule. He just wrote out the tenor melody, right? And said, in the first time, you triple the value. The second time, you have the value. And the third one, you do it like it was written out.
You
So it's long, shorter, shortest.
Oh.
And so there are 3 statements of the entire tenor melody. That harks back to a 13th century technique, which was developed in the motet, the isorhythmic motet. What are the 2 parts of the isorhythm? Yes, the talia and the color, right? Did you learn all that in music history? Oh. It's the chief means by which the Ars Nova motet was organized. What's the most famous piece that includes the Ars Nova technique? There have been many stagings of the piece. The Roman de Favo. You don't know that? Did
May
you
as well
talk
be
about
Latin,
that?
Latin to me.
There's a book.
Okay. All right. Let us go to Siddhartha. What I'd like to do is to try to get through the remaining 2 chapters of the first part. Okay? And so the next chapter, where we stopped, was Govinda and Siddhartha making their journey to see the Buddha. What does the word Buddha mean?
Enlightened one?
Bodhi. Comes from Bodhi, yes? Buddha means what?
Enlightened one?
No.
No.
Start as one who achieves one's own goal.
No, that's Siddhartha.
Yeah, no, that's
That's part of it, actually.
we just asked.
One who has achieved supreme wisdom through human means, or through their own means. That's what it means. Oh, pardon that expression. So it means that something that's happened to someone that's basically what they did, not from any outside source. Right. That's very important to understand what that really means in the context of Siddhartha's journey. And with that, of course, we come to the term individual. And you'll see in a minute why, I hope, we read the Neruda poem. Okay, so they make their trip to see the Buddha, and they stop and ask this woman, has she ever seen the Buddha? And she says, well, certainly I see him every day, right? And so they say he's located at where? He's usually found where? If you didn't read this, you won't know it. We're actually on page 21. If you've taken the Evelyn Wood speed reading course, you can probably follow along.
Give the J.
Oh,
Chetavana or something.
yeah.
Yadvana, yeah?
Yes.
And look at the top of page 21. If I'd had a child of my own, which I don't, I have a stepson who is absolutely marvelous. He's appearing in a play in New York very soon. He's starting his acting career. At any rate, in the garden of Anathapindika.
Wow.
That's a great name. Suppose you were called Anathapindika. That's a great name. All right. He's a rich merchant, right? Or garden. Yes. All right. Well, now let's look at the next page. Look, said Siddhartha softly to Govinda. There's the Buddha. Govinda looked attentively at the monk and the yellow cowl. What is a cowl? Not Kenneth Cowell. He's an organist. Right. What's a cowl? It's a hood, right? Like a monk's hood, part of the thing. Could not be distinguished in any way from the hundreds of other monks, and yet Govinda soon recognized him. Yes, it was he, and they followed him and watched him. The Buddha went quietly on his way, lost in thought. His peaceful countenance was neither happy nor sad. Isn't that something that we said was the tone of that poem we just read? Okay? He seemed to be smiling gently, inwardly. Well, if it was inwardly, how could you tell he was smiling? But, it's poetry. With a secret smile, not unlike that of a healthy child. He walked along peacefully and quietly. And someone pointed out to me there's a constant reference to children or childlike or children. Okay. All right. And the last paragraph ends, so Govinda wandered into the town to obtain alms, and the two samanas recognized him only by his complete peacefulness of demeanor, by the stillness of his form, in which there was no seeking, no will, no counterfeit or pretense, no effort, only light and peace. Right, so we get the impression of what the Buddha is, and we continue on. They find the grove, and they're there, and they discover that there are tons of people there, and On and on. All right. Did any of you read this? Have you read this part? Okay, let's look at the bottom of page 26. Not the bottom of the page. Beginning with silently the Buddha nodded his consent. Siddhartha goes to speak to the Buddha. And this is what Siddhartha said. O illustrious one, in one thing above all have I admired your teachings. Everything is completely clear and proved. You show the world as a complete unbroken chain, an eternal chain linked together by cause and effect. Never has it been presented so clearly, never has it been so irrefutably demonstrated. Surely, every Brahman's heart must beat more quickly when through your teaching he looks at the world, completely coherent, without a loophole, clear as crystal, not dependent on chance, not dependent on the gods. Whether it is good or evil, whether life in itself is pain or pleasure, whether it is uncertain, that it may be perhaps, but this is not important. But the unity of the world, the coherence of all events, the embracing of the big and the small from the same stream, from the same law of cause, of becoming and dying, this shines clearly from your exalted teachings, O perfect one. But according to your teachings, this unity and logical consequence of all things is broken in one place. Through a small gap, there streams into the world of unity something strange, something new, something that was not there before, and that cannot be demonstrated and proved. That is your doctrine of rising above the world, of salvation. What is a doctrine of salvation? It occurs in many religions. What's the technical term for that?
Like what?
No, maybe some of you have surmised my obsession with theological systems. Soteriology. That is the concept of salvation or transformation as it expressed in religion. Soteriology. Look it up if you want to know. All right, so that's what he says. That's what he's referring to. Now, that in itself is an opportunity for discussion, because as with many religious writings, or that have a being as the source of the religion or the philosophy or the writings, there are no preserved writings of the Buddha. They're all handed down. You know anything about Buddhism and the texts of Buddhism? However, Asoka, who was a ruler shortly after or during the end of the Buddha's life, makes reference to him. He was a secular leader. We assume that he actually existed, and we know that two of the philosophers that by philology we assume that he studied with, they were actual people. So that's the content of the authenticity of the Buddha. But in terms of the writings, it's like so many things. They are handed down by mouth, and then they become interpreted, and then there's interpretations. What's that famous quote of James Joyce? Interpretations of interpretations interpreted. You don't know that quote? It's such a great one. Okay, it's an insight into his writing, not the Buddha's writing. Oh, perfect one, but according to your teachings, there's something strange and new that was not there before. That is your doctrine of rising above the world of salvation. With this small gap, through this small break, however, the eternal and single world law breaks down again. Forgive me if I raise this objection. Gautama had listened quietly, motionless, and now the perfect one spoke in his kind, polite, and clear voice. You have listened well to the teachings, O Brahmin son, and it's to your credit that you have thought so deeply about them. You have found a flaw. Think well about it again. Let me warn you, you who are thirsty for knowledge, against the thicket of opinions and the conflict of words. Opinions mean nothing. They may be beautiful or ugly, clever or foolish. Anyone can embrace or reject them. The teachings which you have heard, however, is not my opinion, and its goal is not to explain the world to those who are thirsty for knowledge. Its goal is quite different. Its goal is salvation from suffering. That is what Gautama teaches, nothing else. Now it goes on from here, and what does, if you've read it, what does Siddhartha say?
This is not something that can be taught.
He says, I don't doubt that what you say is true. I see it in your person. I hear it in your teachings. And I don't doubt that you are a holy one, right? But then he says what?
Like nothing that's true enlightenment can be learned from somebody else.
Yes. Well, not, he means something specific. To nobody, O illustrious one, can you communicate in words and teachings what happened to you in the hour of your enlightenment. Now, that is a profound remark, I believe. And I think it is unfortunately misunderstood because it's in words, and I'm not sure of what the meaning of the word enlightenment is, but we know what it might mean in this circumstance here.
Does this
What is he
relate-
trying?
Oh, sorry.
No, what is he trying to say? What is he saying?
Can't teach nirvana.
Well, that one's internal individual experience, but in the act of sharing it, that person is not experiencing it.
Well, that's one thing, and that's an abstract way of saying that. Right? But what is it that you can't share?
Your reality with someone else.
No.
Your own personal enlightenment.
And what does that mean?
Can't teach people how to be enlightened.
Can't
Well,
share
what is the
experience.
enlightenment?
Well, so this
The wisdom.
What is the content of enlightenment?
If we knew, we'd all be enlightened.
You like self-produce, like organically produced.
Something that is internal and intentional, right? So it must be an aspect of the mind somehow, but it isn't knowledge that comes from the outside.
It seems like it comes from your life experiences.
It could. The life experience that the Buddha talked about is suffering and pain.
Yeah.
And there's no escape from that. I mean, life is, for a lot of people outside of this room, ugly, violent, unfulfilled, desperate, and sad. That's basically the attitude of the world, right? The moments of joy or happiness are fleeting and passing. The majority of the world lives in turmoil, in strife. So, would it be just the elimination of suffering that would transcend someone and make them realize happiness? Is happiness the goal in life?
No.
You know, I was looking at the calendar the other day and it says the International Day of Happiness. You've got to be out of your ever mind. It's someday in March. Did you know that?
What happens if your house burns down on the International Day of Happiness? Can you sue the government or something?
Apparently, or sue the people who write the smiley faces and all that. No, I'm not,
Well,
you know,
maybe
I'm
some
being a
arsonists
little
really
bit
happy.
facetious.
Well, it's, you know.
Wait a
like-
minute, let me just say this, okay? Let's turn this to a musical thing, right? And this is one of the connections that I try to make. And you may think it's silly, but I think it's in my worldview, I think it's profound. You cannot teach anybody to improvise. That is a fact. You cannot do that.
Well, how do you define teaching?
You can't instruct them in the art of improvisation. You cannot do that.
From personal experience, I disagree.
I've never known anyone that can do it. Never
I played
known anyone.
improv, and I had a teacher say, "It sounds like the Arvin's exercises that you play every day." And so I improvised again, and it didn't sound like something, and like an Arvin's exercise. So I learned something, and therefore I was taught improvisation.
I don't think so.
QED.
I don't think so.
But again,
Improvisation is something that comes out of an area or a portion of your mind
It's
that you
like
have
teaching
no
writing.
access to at all.
You can teach someone to improve their style or to do it this way or that way, but you can't teach someone how to create a sentence or how to
No,
write a story.
no,
just do it.
you cannot do it.
In that sense, you
You
can't teach
have
anyone
no, you have no awareness of the state of your grammar. You have no idea how you acquired it. You cannot explain it, and you cannot learn it. It is something that is internal to your mind. And furthermore, you have no contact with what is the nature of thought, which is improvisation and language and speech, is an artifactual component of what your mind is doing. There is no way that you know what that is. No mapping of the neurological structure of the brain will ever, in this lifetime or this universe, be able to capture that.
You don't need to know what it is to be able to use it, though.
I didn't say that.
You know, maybe
I said that you cannot teach improvisation. You cannot teach someone to speak. You acquire that through some mysterious process.
And then sometimes when 2-year-olds are walking through the store and they make a grammatical error, their parents correct them, and therefore their grammar improves.
Yeah,
No.
they didn't just teach them how to
They
speak,
didn't
though.
teach them that.
They helped them fix a mistake.
That's not teaching.
It's
No.
a
Then they're not
higher
learning.
level than the fundamental learning how to do it in the first place.
Me want cookie. That's perfectly grammatical.
Understandable.
That is perfectly grammatical.
Nobody taught you how to say first me and then want. You just do
And
it.
cookie. That's a perfectly grammatical statement. No one taught you that. Sat you down with a book and said, subject, verb, whatever. Those things are not learned. They are acquired. Comes from a part of your mind that's inaccessible. That is one of the reasons why many facets, up until contemporary time, and it's still questionable, in psychology are crystal ball, Ouija board, opinion. You cannot introspect into someone's mind. You cannot do it. What you're doing is formulating something you already know through language or thought. You can't do it. Cannot do it. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. That's actually what this is referring to. You cannot do that. What is the point of studying counterpoint? To teach you to improvise? What's the point of studying that?
To like help
Teach
you
you how to improvise good.
acquire musical.
No.
To help you acquire aspects of musical syntax. and
Yes.
grammar.
Yes. By hearing those patterns, you become aware of elements of elements of musicalistic structure. Those elements are in all world music. It's not some kind of enculturation. That is a false theory. Yes, I'm not denying culture. I'm not doing that. Everybody has their culture, right? But that has nothing to do with mental capacity or the way in which the mind operates, regardless of what person X has to say. Those are very superficial things. It's one of the reasons why I think the content of this little novel is so important. Okay, let's continue for just a moment. So, the teachings of the enlightened Buddha embrace much. They teach much. How to live righteously, how to avoid evil, But there is one thing that this clear, worthy instruction does not contain. It does not contain the secret of what the illustrious one himself experienced. He alone, among hundreds of thousands. That is what I thought and realized when I heard your teachings. This is why I'm going on my way, not to seek another and a better doctrine, for I know there is none, but to leave all doctrines and all teachers, and to teach my goal alone, and to reach my goal alone, or die, or you're going to die anyway. But I will often remember this day, O illustrious one, and this hour when my eyes beheld a holy man. And then at the end, the Buddha walked away, and his look on page 29. His smile remained imprinted on Siddhartha's memory forever. I have never seen a man look and smile, sit and walk like that, he thought. I also would like to look and smile and sit and walk like that, so free, so worthy, so restrained, so candid, so childlike and mysterious. A man only looks and walks like that when he has conquered his self. I also will conquer myself. And after all of that, I will also conquer myself. So doesn't that give you an idea of what is next to come? I believe so. All right. So now we go to the chapter, The Awakening. Is it an awakening? And the first part of the book ends. All right. Now look, I am no guru. I'm no, like, sage of the ages, right? The point of this is to open your mind. And, you know, I said to you at the very beginning, one of the actual purposes is to destroy everything you ever believed. Right? Or to disassemble it so that you can reassemble it. At any rate, happy Valentine's Day. Love to you all. Compassion, peace, and salvation to all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Extra copies.
What? Okay. Now look, Amr, you know that